Right by Them, a Magnus Archives fanfiction written by Esperosis and read by Ives Podfic. Chapter 17, The New Door. 3 weeks later, the day John had been dreading and had nearly forgotten was coming, finally arrived, with everything else that had happened to suggest slipped through the cracks. It wasn't that it wasn't important, that she wasn't important, but everything was quickly getting away from him with how things were changing, and John was just desperately having to play catch-up. But this was happening the exact same way that it did the first time around. Helen looked awful, staring at the paper in front of her, desperately trying to draw a map of a place designed not to make sense, to consume the victim's sanity purely by exposure. But she was trying, desperately trying to hang on to her sanity by a thread. John felt so very bad for her. It doesn't make sense, she lamented after scratching more and more overlapping lines. There weren't any left turns. I just went forward, and the path stayed the same length. They never got shorter or went to the right. They just, look at it! Helen held up the paper, holding it up to John's eyes. The map was just a mess of scratches and straight lines overlapping and dissecting. It looked more like a child's scribbling than any sort of map. You're right, John looked sadly at the paper. The map doesn't make any sense. After a few turns, it just doesn't work. It's not possible, Helen fretted. You're quite right, Helen. It doesn't make any sense to, John swallowed over the lump of his throat. If you could just start at the beginning. What happened? Helen stared at him, her eyes wide and searching, desperate, before looking back down at the map and nodding. John pressed record on the tape recorder on his desk, and he heard the gentle whirring of the tape as it began to spin. Statement of Helen Richardson regarding a new door in the house she was selling. Statement recorded directly from subject, 2nd of October 2016. Statement begins. And then Helen began to speak. The words flowed through her, while her panicked ramblings were nowhere to be seen as the eyes flowed through her. He still remembered his story from before. Her words, and his version of her gave the exact same tale, word for word. It hurt to do this to her, to take this from her, but did he really have any right to feel bad? He knew what he was doing, and he did it anyway. Basir was right about him. He was a monster. Finally, Helen's story concluded, and both were released from the eye's gaze. Both could breathe again, even if John was the only one who knew what exactly had been stopping their breath. John clicked the recorder off before speaking. I'm very sorry that happened to you, Helen, he told her earnestly. You believe me then? Helen asked tearfully. Yes, John nodded. I think I know who you encountered, the man. Helen's eyes widened. You do? Yes, John confirmed. You said he gave you his name. Was it Michael? Helen nodded. I thought so. Michael is... We've encountered him before. My assistant, Sasha, has. I don't think he's done with you. Helen nearly leapt out of her chair as a look of panic overtook her expression, and John's heart twisted. He's not? What do I do? John swallowed hard. You have to make sure to only tell her things she should know. You said he took you through a door? Yes! Then let's try being careful around doors from now on. Leave all your doors open in your home. Let other people open them for you, or enter them at the same time as others. That sort of thing. Right, Helen nodded. And is that forever? John cringed. Probably. Helen deflated a bit, but nodded. Okay, right. Well, I guess everyone has their quirks. Could be worse. He laughed humorlessly. Yes. John nodded before standing up. Here, let me escort you out. Oh, thank you. Helen seemed to deflate with relief. For, well, everything. I feel a lot better now. I'm glad. John gave her a weak smile as he held out his arm for her to take. She gently wrapped her arm around his, and John took a moment to revel in how human she was, how human she hopefully would remain to be. She had some tools to defend herself now. Pitifully few, but, hopefully, it would get her on the right track. She seemed smart and determined. Hopefully, she'd be able to learn to navigate her new life and eventually manage to evade Michael's claws. For now, though, John opened the door out of his office for her, and they stepped out into the bullpen. What's behind the door? Anything, really. A room, a corridor, a hallway, an exit. An entrance, a home, a morgue, a foyer, a closet, a ballroom, a tomb, a cathedral, a bedroom, a cottage, an office, a palace, a barrack, an asylum, an arena, a terminal, an aqueduct, a barn, a depot, an embassy, a forge, a mall, a mosque, a pavilion, a vault, a warehouse, a tower, an observatory, a dream. What's behind a smile? Whatever I tell you. The store leads down and 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 down and... Can you see your insides? Not really. It's quite dark inside your body. There isn't any light to roll downstairs. If you close your eyes, maybe. But even then, you're just seeing the inside of your eyelids, or maybe the top of the bottom of your top of your skull. I could show you just what those twisting intestines of yours see. You wouldn't like it though. Not really.
Lines twist in ways that make perfect sense when you don't think about it. Just stare at the line. Just stare at the lines. Watch them dance in front of, behind your eyes. Try not to think about how your brain twists with them. Try not to think about anything. It's better this way. The lights move in such lovely little ways. The colors dance behind and in front of your eyes. The invitations join them and you'll feel better. So much better. Dance with the colors, be the color. It'll make you feel better. Just forget about those pesky three-dimensional concepts. Fold yourself into something kinder. Fold yourself into something that screams in fear every time it breathes. Yes, just like that. Keep screaming. Good. What's behind the door? Nothing. Nothing you'd be interested in anyway. Not that door. No, really. You don't want to open that one. Ah, well.
John gasped for air as he held onto Tim's arm. Tim was rocking him in his arms as he held onto his shoulders in a white-knuckle grip. The colors were still dancing behind his eyes, but everything was starting to fade. The month he had spent with Helen was fading from his memory until only the barest hint of it remained. He gasped again and again, desperate for air that didn't corkscrew his lungs, desperate for contact that didn't hurt or tremble, or it was fading. And as he lost more, he tentatively reached out for the memories, scared to lose the knowledge he had gained. But some larger part of him rebuffed his efforts, more than happy to be rid of the poison that had been injected into his mind. His heart rate lowered, and his gasps became breaths as he loosened his grip on Tim, even as the other made no move to do the same. John's muscles finally unwound, the tight coils loosening into useless meat as his bad hand screamed in agony. He finally went limp in Tim's hold as Tim continued to hold him. John tried to speak, but he couldn't get his mouth to work properly. Tim didn't respond. He just kept muttering something. John swallowed more air and focused on his breathing and listened to Tim. I'm going to kill him? I'm going to fucking kill him. How fucking dare he? I'll kill him, Tim muttered fiercely. John's entire body trembled, and he was barely able to move. But he still forced his good hand to limply rub against Tim's shoulder blades, causing the man to freeze. It's gonna... John took a deep breath. Be okay. We're fine. Tim held John closer to his chest. Are you feeling better, John? I don't... What happened? John asked. You've been missing for 3 hours, Tim told him. You went into your office to take a statement from that lady, then you never came out. We went in to check on you, but you were gone. Sasha and Martin went to check the tunnels. I came back here just in case you, I don't fucking know, turned into mist to escape through the tiny-ass window. I look around, hear a weird-ass door behind me, and find a gateway to the inside of a migrant and you crawling out. Weird-ass blonde guy with knife hands watching you and laughing. Michael, John supplied. Yeah, figured, Tim held him. Martin's in the tunnels with Sasha, John asked. Tim turned to look at him, an eyebrow raised. Yeah? He's, John swallowed. But he's claustrophobic. Tim stared down at him for a long moment before he started laughing and shaking his head. You get kidnapped by a supernatural monster and your first concern is Martin is claustrophobic? John flushed. Well, yes. That was his first concern. Because getting kidnapped and tortured by monsters was hardly something new to him. But watching it happen was something new to Tim. I just... How shit self-preservation, I know, Tim sighed. What happened? I mean, after I crawled out, apparently. Tim frowned. You don't remember? John shook his head, and Tim continued. You were just screaming mostly, yelling about how you couldn't do this. It's too much. I didn't ask for this. I don't know what he did to you in there, John, but maybe it's best you don't remember. Right. Christ, John breathed. You didn't know why he couldn't remember what had happened in the spiral. That had never happened before. Then again, he'd never entered the spiral when Michael had been the distortion, when Michael had the sole motive of hardening him. Maybe Michael had pushed him too hard, and he had finally snapped. The eye preferred him sane. He was much more interesting to watch that way. Well, that settled that. The spiral had broken his mind, and the eye had forced him to forget the whole thing once he'd escaped in order to keep his sanity intact. Good Lord. No wonder he felt like he'd gotten hit by a bus. I'm tired, Tim, John finally admitted. Tim nodded. Just rest up, all right. I'll let the others know you're here. Thanks, John nodded, and Tim lifted him and carried him the short distance to the couch in his living room before stepping away to make a call to Sasha and Martin on the phone. John closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but he could still feel the spiral buzzing behind his eyes. Even without the memory, the marked dots behind his eyelids made him too aware of his surroundings in order to sleep. His clothes rubbed at his skin in the ways that made him want to flay himself alive. He tossed and turned and grimaced as he listened to Tim explain what had happened to Sasha and Martin when he had finally managed to reach them. He tried not to chew at the inside of his mouth or scratch at his skin as Tim sat on the ground next to him, and they both waited for Sasha and Martin to arrive. He didn't open his eyes. He didn't want to try and talk. He wanted to sleep, desperately wanted to rest, but he couldn't. John scowled instead as he turned to face the back of the couch where Tim couldn't see. Soon he heard the front door open, and Sasha and Martin entered. John turned to look at them, and they looked a mess. Slightly dirty, but very disheveled from their expedition into the tunnels. "John!" Martin ran over to him and hugged him. And finally, John's skin felt like it settled. The awful buzzing calmed down into a gentle hum before settling completely. "Martin John coughed. "Are you all right? Tim said you went into the tunnels. I know you're claustrophobic." Martin fired indignantly. Am I okay? John, you just got kidnapped by a monster." "I told you." Tim gently messed up John's hair with his knuckles. "Yes, John," Martin sighed fondly. "I'm fine because you're fine." Martin brought a hand up to John's face, cupping his cheek. John brought his own hand to hold Martin's against his face, and finally he could breathe properly. "So," Sasha announced, "it seems we have our culprit." "Seems so," Tim agreed. "Culprit?" John asked. "As to who tried to kill you with that Lightner page." At this point, it seemed pretty obvious that it was Michael. Sasha sat herself down on the floor next to him. "Michael?" John sat up in alarm. "No, that wasn't right. Michael was... well, Michael. But Elias was the one who had tried to kill him. It's a supernatural monster, one that seems pretty adept at messing with technology, and it's demonstrated the ability to basically show up wherever, whenever, with those doors of his," Sasha explained. "He definitely could have done it." "Yeah," Tim scowled. "And it seems like he came back to finish the job today." John swallowed hard. "I don't think that's, why he showed up." The trio stared at him, and John sighed before swinging his legs off the couch, sitting up properly. The others wasted no time in joining him on the couch. Martin on his right, Tim on his left, and Sasha sat herself on the armrest next to Tim, her legs tucked under her side. Helen's statement, it was about Michael. He had, taken her into the corridor through a strange door. She was terrified and relieved when I told her I knew who she was talking about. I had a feeling he wasn't done with her, so I warned her that if he'd taken her through a door, to be careful of them in the future. John continued, offered to escort her out of my office in the institute, opening doors for her so she wouldn't get caught again. And instead, Michael dragged you in too," Sasha finished for him. John grimaced. "It would seem so." Sasha groaned. "So that doesn't necessarily mean he's the one that poisoned you? Damn." "Still could have," Tim muttered. "Oh yeah," Sasha nodded. "I'm not saying take him off the suspect list. It's just not confirmed quite yet anyways." John nodded, satisfied. "Now, what did you mean by you had a feeling Michael wasn't dead with her yet?" Sasha asked, and John felt his stomach drop. Truthfully, he had just said that because he was on the spot and had no idea how to explain his future knowledge as something mundane. More honestly, he really hoped that they wouldn't look into it. Christ, he really did have rotten luck. John cringed. "I'm not sure, I just had a feeling." Sasha raised an eyebrow at that, and Tim and Martin also didn't seem convinced. John grimaced. I don't know, okay? I'm not sure," John lied. Sometimes I just get these weird feelings. I just know something I'm not supposed to. I don't know why, it's just, I can't explain it." "You know something you're not supposed to?" Tim raised an eyebrow and laughed. "What, like when she snoops on our online accounts?" "I don't know, Tim," John tensed. "We're not upset, John," Martin told him. I just know stuff. It's kind of vague." "It's vague," John admitted. It just happens sometimes. It's hard to explain." "Could you try?" Martin asked. John gritted his teeth, but really, he could never deny anything Martin asked of him. He took a deep breath and began. "You know how the moon orbits the earth and the earth orbits the sun? You don't have to look outside to check, you just know it. You know the sky is up and the gravity is down. There aren't things you need to check or even actively remember, you just know." "Okay," Martin nodded and Sasha's eyes gleamed. "So you can just know things. It's not something I can control. I can't turn it off," John explained defensively. "I don't mean to pry." Sasha shook her head. "Is it happening more often as time goes on?" "Yes," John admitted, his eyes downcast. "So it's growing?" Yes, it's getting worse." Sasha clasped her hands together. "Do you know what this means, John?" "That something's wrong with me?" John fiddled with the fingers of his bad hand. "No," Sasha grinned. "If you can figure out a way to practice with your power and figure out how to control it, we can figure out anything and everything we want to know. We could find out who tried to kill you." John looked up at her, wide-eyed. "You want me to know more things?" "Yeah," Sasha nodded. "Do you have any idea how useful that is?" "I, for one, am against it," Tim spoke up, and Sasha's head snapped to look at him, confused. "I agree," Martin spoke up. "What? Why? This is great news," Sasha asked. We could learn whatever we need." Yeah," Martin replied. "And if we were getting that information from, like, a book or something, I'd be all for it. But this is John's head we're talking about. What if, like, it turns him into a living Google or something and eats his personality?" "I agree with Martin," Tim nodded. "Would knowing everything be super useful?" "Yeah. But I'm not willing to potentially sacrifice John in order to do so," Sasha wailed. I didn't mean..." "No, it's all right, Sasha," John assured her. I know you didn't mean anything like that. It's just knowing everything does sound pretty useful, but it scares me. Why, Martin asked. It's not random instant things I learn. It's useful, but sometimes really personal. Like what someone else is thinking or feeling, or just something they'd likely rather I not know. Like what? Sasha asked, and John sighed. I'd rather not say if I'm being honest. Oh, so it is like Sasha snooping on our personal accounts? Yes, but think of stuff you'd never even let leave your own head, John cringed. Tim's expression darkened as Martin flushed and Sasha and frowned slightly. I don't mean to, John burst out. It's still rare, and nothing that bad, not from any of you. I can't control it. I don't want to know things you don't want to tell me. But it's kinda hard not to when you've got a spy device randomly beaming our info into your head, Tim offered, and John nodded. How about from now on, if you randomly know anything personal about us, you tell us privately, and we promise not to get upset about it, Martin offered, looking over John, Tim, and Sasha. Sasha nodded quickly, while Tim nodded a bit slower. John, for his part, just stared between the two in confusion. You're not upset. You can't control it, can you? Martin asked. No. Well then, Martin huffed a laugh. It's not really fair of us to get mad at something out of your control. But John trailed off, blinking in shock and amazement at the three. This was not how he expected this conversation to go. It certainly wasn't how the conversation went last time. Then again, there wasn't really a conversation last time. Just a sudden realization for all of them, followed by threats of bodily harm and accurate name-calling. This was not any of those things. All right, John nodded. I'll, let you all know if I, know anything about you three. Or Georgie. Christ, I'm going to have to talk to her about this too. Later. For now, I think we all deserve a break after the shit show of a day today was, Tim grinned. I'll reorder some takeout, and we're going to watch whatever documentary John picks, because he gets movie privileges on the virtue of getting kidnapped by the evil rave hallways. Ooh, I hope you ordered from that Italian place, Sasha picked up. Nope, the Thai place John likes. Sasha moaned dramatically before throwing herself onto Tim, who just laughed at her. John smiled at the pair and didn't resist when Martin gently pulled him towards himself. John turned right as Martin pulled him fully against him and held him. I'm really glad you're okay, John, Martin told him. John smiled. I'm glad you're okay, too. John just wished he could have said the same for Helen.